So for today's video, I'm going to be ranking the 21 Pixar films, starting at my least favorite and working my way up to my absolute favorite. So that's not me saying that my choices are the correct choices or the critically acclaimed correct choices, because some of the movies that I'm going to place at the bottom are ones that are critically ranked at the absolute top. And that's just because this list is going to be based on my nostalgia with these movies and how I grew up with them and my experiences with them. So keep that in mind as you're listening, and feel free to comment your list below, because I know that these lists are going to differ. So don't hate me if your favorite movie ends up on the bottom of the list. It's just how I view them personally. So before I start, I just want to say that I don't think that any Pixar film is bad. I don't think that they have a bad movie. I think they have movies that are better than others. They have movies that are absolutely perfect, but I don't think they have any movies that are absolutely just terrible. So nothing on this list is going to be a movie that I'm going to say is horrible. There's just films on here that I'll put in to watch sometimes, and there's films on here that I'll never really choose to watch. So that's how they make their way onto the bottom of the list. So I'm going to be starting at the bottom of the list and working my way up. So at number 21, I'm going to say Cars 3. And that's just because I really like the Cars franchise in general, because I grew up at the right time for it. But with Cars 3, it built up so much hype with the trailers, and it looked like it was going to be this adult version of the Cars franchise. And then what we got was they took Mater, who they made the focal point of the second movie, and they sidelined him, which it should have been a more of a team effort movie. And we kind of got this story with new characters, and it was fun, but it was unmemorable if you ask me. I couldn't tell you the new characters' names off the top of my head. If I really thought about it, I could probably remember them, but I'm not interested in remembering them. I feel like this movie, it was trying to do a new thing, and I appreciate it for that. Maybe if I would rewatch it sometime soon, it would work its way up higher on my list. But as of right now, it's just at the main bottom because it didn't feel memorable. Number 20 is going to be a controversial pick, and that's going to be Up. And that's just because I did not grow up with that movie. I grew up with Incredibles and Cars and Toy Stories. But when Up came out, it was right at that time when I was kind of like not interested in animated movies anymore and thought I had to grow out of that. So I didn't go see it in theaters, and I heard people talking about it, but by the time I got around to seeing it, I liked the first 20 minutes. They're brilliant. The first 20 minutes of that film are really, really well crafted, but I just feel like once you get on the island, and there's the talking dogs, and the crazy old man villain who, it just doesn't feel like the same movie. It feels like two separate films. And I really like the first part, and I really don't like the second part. So for that first part, it's not on the bottom of my list, because that first 20 minutes or so is brilliant. And the imagery is obviously super famous at this point, but I don't like the second half of this movie. I probably will never choose to sit and watch the second half of this movie again, because it just doesn't interest me. Coming in at number 19 is going to be The Good Dinosaur, and this is another one where I feel like most people would have this on the absolute bottom of their list, but I went and saw this on my birthday with my family, and it was a good time while we were there, and no one can deny that some of the scenes in this movie are absolutely beautiful, and I think overall the story feels cohesive. That's my problem with Up. This one actually feels like it's a complete story, and then it doesn't break off into two separate pieces. So that's why it comes in above Up for me. I really like the idea of having the dinosaur be the main character and the human is his, sidekick. I think that was a smart idea. And it has some scenes that are definitely emotionally gripping, as Pixar always does. So I think this movie deserves that spot. It's definitely not one of my favorite Pixar movies, clearly, but it is one that I would watch it. I would maybe struggle staying awake the whole time, but I would watch it if it came on again. So yeah, that one comes in at number 19 on my list. Number 18 is going to be another controversial pick on this list, and it's going to be WALL-E. So let me explain myself on this one. This one also came out around the same time as Up, and I was at that age where I didn't want to go see animated movies, and I was too old for them, so it's partially my fault that I don't appreciate these movies the way that I should. But I actually did go to watch WALL-E in theaters with my family because my little sister wanted to go. And we absolutely hated it at the time. I was bored to death. We were playing around in the theater seats because to us at the time, I was probably around 10 years old, and she was like 6. That movie could not hold our attention, not as little kids. And my mom was so bored at the film, so we ended up leaving the theater early, which I've never done, and that's the only movie that's ever happened with. We left and went to go get ice cream, and I realized that's probably like a horrible crime to some of you, but my own experience with WALL-E is that it wasn't super interesting to me. Looking back on the film, I can appreciate a lot of it, but I don't really like the messaging of once it gets to the people who are all fat and running around in their little motor chairs. I understand what they're going for, but to me it's just a little over the top and a little preachy, and I'm okay without seeing this movie. You know, I appreciate it for what it is, and I do respect some aspects of it. The WALL-E and Eve, the score, there's some beautiful songs on the score that I have on my phone and I always keep downloaded. But the movie itself as a whole just doesn't necessarily do what I would need it to do in order to call it one of my favorite Pixar films. Number 17 is going to be Cars 2, and I know that's another one that people would put down at the bottom of their list most of the time, but this is one that worked me back into seeing animated movies. And when I went to see it, I was expecting more of the same from Cars 1 because I hadn't paid attention to the advertising or anything, and it turns out it was a spy movie, which made no sense, but at the time, I was at that age where that was actually pretty cool, and I bought the toys, and I remember having the Finn missile. I had the cars that I drove around everywhere. I really liked that character. I liked Mater in the first movie, so having him in being the main focal point of Cars 2 was actually cool for me at the time. Now, looking back on this movie, that's why it moves down on the ranking, because does it make sense for Cars 2 to be about spies? No, it makes absolutely no sense. But that's the movie we got, and I'm not going to sit here and say I hated it. I enjoyed that movie a lot, and I would sit and watch that movie right now if it came on. I really do have a nostalgic feeling for it, so it's not at the top of my list, of course, but it has a solid place in my heart, at least. Number 16 is going to be Incredibles 2, and I haven't really gotten to think about this movie yet, because I watched it when it came out in theaters, and I haven't watched it again since then. I've watched little bits and pieces, but I haven't really gotten to sit and comprehend it again. And so, I think that's why it just doesn't really resonate with me. This is one of those films that if I rewatched it, it would probably work its way up a little bit higher on my list, but to me right now, it's just a little unmemorable, and I remember bits and pieces, but it didn't do anything for me like the original did, and so for that, I had to really knock it down on the list. It's nice seeing those characters all back together again, but it just doesn't feel right. Coco, I'm going to be placing at number 15, and that's a decent ranking for this movie, considering that I went into this film already having seen Book of Life, and I really liked that movie, and I didn't think this was going to compare to that. I was dead set that I liked Book of Life the best. And they're about equal now, but going into this film, my main problem with it is that it felt like watching Pixar trying to do a Disney movie, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't hold that same level of other Pixar movies, in my opinion. It has a good story, it has beautiful, beautiful animation, but I'm not a big fan of the music. The characters weren't exactly memorable. The villain was kind of subpar. The movie overall holds up, but when you begin to break it down, the story itself of having the little boy who wants to play music but his family won't let him, it feels repetitive. It doesn't feel very original for Pixar, and I guess I was just a little disappointed with the movie, is all. But yeah, looking back on it, it's a good film, and the fact that it is so beautiful to look at really, really helps it get up higher on this list. But at the end of the day, I don't necessarily think that the story is anything groundbreaking. I think it's just a good movie. At number 14, I'm going to put Finding Dory, and that's because I wasn't necessarily old enough to really experience Finding Nemo when it came out. I loved the movie, I decorated my room in Nemo, but I grew into knowing the story. I never got to experience it that first time because I never really understood it the first time that I watched it. So going into Finding Dory, it was a thrilling experience. I was on the edge of my seat. I honestly felt like I was watching like an action movie or something. Not because there was like fighting or anything, but because there were so many hurdles that you kept going through. And to me, it was like a roller coaster of a film, which was a lot of fun. And you had these original characters that we all already knew and loved, so they didn't have to waste any time setting anything up. They just go for it. And to me, that makes for a really fun watching experience. Me and my friends joked about the seals for weeks. The Hank was a great character. At the end, when they were all trying to drive the truck, and it was an octopus and seals and fish driving a truck, and it makes no sense. And I understand that, but that's the reason for animation, is that you can do what is not possible in real life. And for them to just make a hilarious gag about the animals driving the truck and then it going over and reuniting everyone, it was so much fun to watch. And I honestly will always appreciate this movie for the fact that it gave me so many good memories when it came out, of all of my friends and talking about it. This movie will always have a special place for me, just because it's so much fun. At number 13, right above Finding Dory, I'm gonna put A Bug's Life. And that's just because, not that I necessarily love this movie, but it has that original Pixar quality that the original team had. The ones who made Toy Story and Monsters, Inc. and A Bug's Life and Toy Story 2 and Finding Nemo. All those movies just have this feeling of, I want to say nostalgia, but it's more than that. They really have this quality about them that just makes them stand out from other animated films. And so I always appreciate A Bug's Life for the Randy Newman score and for the very, very good characters. The animation is, of course, top-notch for today. I will always appreciate A Bug's Life simply for those matters. The movie itself is good, it's nothing outstanding, but that original Pixar quality really gets it some extra points in my book. Number 12 is going to be Toy Story 4, and I just did a review on this film, kind of dogging it the whole time, but once you've seen the movie and you have time to really sit and think about it, is it the best Toy Story film? No. But I can see how it makes sense in some ways. There are some problems that I can't get over, and this is kind of a spoiler if you haven't seen the film. But I just keep thinking, what if Andy was to come back home for summer and he went over to visit Varney and check up on his toys and he realized that his favorite toy is gone, missing? Like, it just kind of feels like he gave them away for nothing. I feel like Woody would have been happier going off to college with Andy than he would have been where he is now. And I know he's happy with Bo and the new characters, but I'm not going to go into that right now. I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to say this movie, the animation is beautiful. It has great music. It has those classic Toy Story characters. I've always been a Woody fan, so having him front and center again, really, I appreciated it. This movie holds up after you've seen it, but the immediate reaction isn't great. But it's been about a week since I've seen it, and looking back on it now, I do appreciate it more than I did first leaving the theater. At number 11 is going to be Finding Nemo, and for the same reasons that I discussed with Finding Dory, I love those characters. It's obviously like a roller coaster of a film, and it has that original Pixar feeling, like I've said before. Now, the reason why it comes in a little low on the list is because there are just other movies that have, over time, become some of my favorites personally. But that doesn't mean that I didn't go through a time where Finding Nemo was just the pinnacle of movies that I had, watched. I remember collecting all the McDonald's toys, and I would swim in the pool and reenact scenes from the film in my head. So yeah, Finding Nemo is always going to have that special place in my heart as well. But I just feel like over time, it's one of those movies that you've seen it so many times that other movies work their way above it. Coming in at number 10 is going to be Monsters Incorporated, and this is one of those movies that as a kid I watched it over and over and over again. I had every toy. I loved Mike and Sully, and I cried at the ending countless times, So growing up, it was one of those films that I would constantly put the VHS tape back in the player. But I think over time, honestly, I kind of wore the movie out because it's one of the ones that I had constant access to on VHS, so I just kept putting it in, watching it over and over and over again. So it's kind of worn out for me for a little while, I just need to give it a few years and kind of not watch it a whole lot, even though that's kind of hard right now because my little cousin that lives with us is watching Monsters Inc. over and over and over again. So yeah, the movie is kind of burned out for me, but that doesn't change the fact that it's one of Pixar's best ideas, taking the idea of having monsters in your closet and turning it into this crazy world where the monsters are just trying to survive based on your screams. That's absolutely classic Pixar, and it's one of those things that makes them as astounding of a company as they are. Monsters Incorporated will always hold a special place for me, but I just think that with time, it's worked its way down my list simply because of overexposure to it. So, do I still love the film? Yes, but as of right now, I think that some other ones are moving their way up my favorites list, which is constantly changing. So, this could easily be in the top 5, a year from now. At number 9, I'm going to place the first Toy Story movie, and where to even begin with this movie? It has an iconic cast of characters. It has iconic voice work, some of the most famous lines in movie history. It has an amazing score with amazing original songs by Randy Newman. This was just an absolute moment in pop culture, and to look back on these amazing characters that are now I think 24 years old, and to see that Toy Story 4 just opened up as like the 3rd highest opening film of the year, that's insane. It's crazy, and it goes to prove that these characters really caught on with an audience back then, and we've just grown up to love them even more. So Toy Story is always going to go down in history as one of the most famous movies, one of the most classic movies of all time. Tom Hanks and Tim Allen do some of the best voice work that Pixar's ever had. I just don't know if there's enough praises that I can give the Toy Story franchise, so I'm sure that everyone's probably sick of hearing me constantly go on about how much I love Toy Story, and there's still 2 movies left to talk about on this list that are from that same franchise, so I'm going to move on from this one. But yeah, the first Toy Story, an absolute classic. Coming in at number 8 is going to be Inside Out, which is one of those films that even if you don't like the story at all, you cannot deny that the animation in that movie is beautiful. Beautiful to look at. It has a beautiful score. Everything about this movie is very atmospheric. The idea of going into a little girl's head and exploring her emotions is a great message for kids because it really relays the message of you can be sad, you can be happy, you can be both, I really like the idea that it tells kids to explore their emotions and not just to feel one way and be mad because you're mad. You can be angry at someone and still want to cry about it, and I really appreciate that Pixar found a way to, I think, perfectly tell that to children. The characters, joy, sadness, anger, disgust, fear, every single one of them are very well realized. I don't think that there's one bad character in this movie. I think that everyone probably came out of this movie at least shedding one tear, and I know that's Pixar's thing now, is getting you to cry, but what works, and I think that it really works in Inside Out. Number 7 is going to be a film that's probably a little obvious, and that's Monsters University. I know that's not everyone's favorite Pixar movie. I know most people like Monsters Incorporated more than Monsters University, but this was one of those films that came out at the time when I was beginning to realize that I could be 15 years old and like animated movies. Big shocker to me at the time. I was absolutely counting down until this movie came out because, as I said earlier, I grew up loving Monsters Incorporated, and when I went and watched the movie, I laughed. I loved seeing the characters get to know each other. I feel like they didn't abandon what was originally special about Mike and Sully's relationship. I feel like they really did a good job at setting it up. I love little things like Mike tells Randall to lose his glasses because if he disappears, his glasses will stay. And when he takes his glasses off, he squints his eyes, and it's like that's why he's always squinting his eyes in the first movie. I don't know. I mean, maybe that is kind of dumb, but to me, that's the kind of things that make me love the movie even more. And watching Mike and Sully build their relationship up, and characters like Art and Terry, I thought those characters were hilarious. Yeah, the jokes are kind of corny, but to me, they work so well, and I love this film, and I probably couldn't watch this movie enough. So I had a tough time flipping between number 5 and number 6 on my list. I kept switching them around, but I ended up putting Ratatouille at number 6. So my personal experience with this movie is I didn't go watch it in theaters, and my aunt actually bought it for me on DVD at Christmas one year. And I opened it up and I was like, oh great, a movie about a rat that cooks. You know, I was so uninterested. And eventually over Christmas break that same year, I was like, well, there's nothing to watch, so I'm just gonna put this movie in and give it a try. I put the film in and I absolutely loved that movie, and I was so upset that I didn't go see it in theaters. And the way that it captures Paris was something I had never really seen before because I was still pretty young at the time. And I wanted to go to Paris for so long after watching this movie. The food in this movie looks so good. It literally makes you hungry watching it. The score in this film, I have had the Ratatouille soundtrack on my phone for a long time now, and it'll probably be on there for a long time from now. The characters are great. It's a hilarious movie. It tells a really good story about not necessarily fitting in with your family and being a little different, and your family doesn't understand that, which I also really, really love. And just the idea of a rat cooking food makes no sense. And the way that Pixar just perfectly captured that and just took it and ran with it is so, so good. And it definitely goes down as one of Pixar's best movies, one of their most well done stories, and in their ability to make you feel bad for a mouse who wants to cook. It's just, that's insane to me. So number 5, the one that I was constantly switching with Ratatouille, is Incredibles. And I ended up putting it at number 5 because as a kid, I loved The Incredibles. I wanted to be Dash more than anything. I wanted to have superpowers. I told my friends that I had secret superpowers and they couldn't tell anyone. I had an Incredibles themed birthday party. I had Incredibles suits. I wore the masks. I wore the shirts. I had the posters. I had the backpack. I was absolutely 100% on the Incredibles hype train. And looking back, that was some of the best memories that I made. In gym, I used to run, and I would replay scenes of the Dash running in the movie and pretend to be in them. This movie does the idea of a superhero family so well, which we haven't really got in live action yet, so no one has really touched what Pixar has initially done before superhero movies were even... I mean, we had Spider-Man and X-Men back then, but nothing was really done on the level of what Pixar did with The Incredibles. I think this movie holds up extremely, extremely well, and I've never gotten tired of watching this film. The jokes hit every single time. It's super relatable, super funny, super well made, amazing, amazing characters. This really was those first 10 years really were Pixar constantly just outdoing themselves, and Incredibles is a testament to that. At number 4 is going to be a film that I know a lot of people don't like, but it's another one of those movies that came out at the time when I was getting back into animation. That's Brave. Everyone says this feels like Pixar trying to do a Disney movie, which is what I think about Coco. And I do understand that, but I think that Brave is good enough to exceed that idea. I think that Merida is an amazing character, and she really caught on with audiences, in my opinion. You can just tell by like going to the Disney World, and you'll see Merida has like her own float, and not every Pixar character can brag about that. And I know she's an official Disney princess, so that's kind of a cheat, but I think that Merida was an absolute blast of a character. I think the music in this film is once again beautiful. Pixar is so good at doing really good scores for their movies. I know that there are issues with the idea of her like poisoning her mom and turning her into a bear and didn't understand what was going to happen, but I think watching the movie she makes a good case for it, and I think that she doesn't understand it. She's a child, and at the end of the day it doesn't glorify at all. It makes it horrifying. It makes it a terrible thing. So I don't think that it gives kids the wrong idea or anything like that. Brave is always going to have a special spot for me, just for the fact that I went to see it in theaters when I wasn't really into seeing animated movies in theaters. So, I personally know that it is not the best Pixar movie, but for me, Brave will always remain one of my favorites simply because it's a story that I needed at the time that it came out. And that's where I'm going to end that. It came out at the right time for me, and it did its job in my life. So we're now in the top 3, and I'm positive that someone out there is probably really annoyed that I haven't named Cars yet. And that's because it is my number 3 movie. It was another of those movies that was at the perfect time for me to just go all out with it. I adored the first Cars movie, and I still adore the first Cars movie. The soundtrack for that film is perfect. The scenery in that film is perfect. The characters are so memorable. I can name almost every character in that movie just based on memory of watching it and scenes with them in it. The comedy is so well done. The pacing is perfect. The animation is just beautiful. I never even liked cars as a kid, like racing cars, but this film is just so well done, and I just don't understand all the hate that it gets. I really think that it's one of Pixar's best works. Yeah, I don't really have much to say about this movie because I know that it's just gonna be divisive, but this film, as of Cars 3 coming out, I remember they reported that it had sold $10 billion worth of merchandise, and if that doesn't tell you that kids really caught on to Cars, then I don't know what would. I think there's more people my age that probably appreciate the movie simply because we were around 5 or 6 at the time that the movie came out, and we got a chance to grow up watching that movie on DVD over and over and over again. So Cars is always going to be super special for me, and not even just for the nostalgia. Watching it now, I think it still holds up just as well as it did back then. So I think my top 2 choices are quite obvious, but I'll just go ahead and say that my number 2 choice is Toy Story 3. Toy Story 3 was the movie that got me back into animation. It was the one that I watched all the behind the scenes. I was studying. When this movie came out, I wanted to go into animation. That's how much I loved this movie. I have seen this movie numerous times since then, and I just think that it is the perfect way to capture these characters. And it was really hard to choose between the 2 movies for which one should go on the top. The only reason Toy Story 2 makes it to the number 1 spot is because of the nostalgia factor, but I'm telling you, Toy Story 3 is just one of those films that I know everyone says, like, oh, it's overhyped, blah blah blah. No, I can watch Toy Story 3 over and over and over again and always find something new to look at. The new characters that were brought in were amazing. They do the perfect job of keeping the old characters front and center and still including new characters like Lotso and Ken, and still making them feel like an organic addition to the story. That was my problem with Toy Story 4, is that where all of our old friends from years past are just kind of sidelined. And the Toy Story franchise clearly works best when you have all of your characters front and center. Give them all equal screen time, except maybe Buzz and Jessie and Woody, because they're like the main 3. I can't praise this movie enough, and I know that everyone's probably sick of hearing me talking about Toy Story, but I've still got one more movie to talk about, and that's Toy Story 2, which is my absolute favorite Pixar movie. I don't think that Pixar's ever tops Toy Story 2. I honestly don't think that they ever will top it. The introduction of Jessie and Bullseye was just, and Stinky Pete, who I know he kind of didn't get exactly what, he didn't really ever come back, but he's a great villain for that movie. Wheezy was an amazing character who was so underused, and I really wanted to see him in Toy Story 4. Toy Story 2 was the one that I constantly put in as a kid, and I watched it a lot. I don't know how much, but I remember watching it a lot. I love the Buzz Lightyear opening scene. I love the music. I love Toy Story 2. Like I said, I'm going to stop talking about Toy Story because I know everyone knows I love Toy Story. But yeah, my number one movie is Toy Story 2. Alright, so that's my ranking of the first 21 Pixar movies. We have 2 more coming out soon. We have Onward and a movie called Soul. We don't know much about those 2 yet, but they'll be out around a year from now, so I'll probably update my list by then. Feel free to leave what you think belongs on the top and bottom of the list below. Leave your whole list below. I don't care to see them. I can talk about Pixar movies all day long. They are just an amazing company. I know that their recent years haven't been as critically praised as their previous years were, but for me, every Pixar movie is a good movie. I've never walked out of a Pixar film and felt like I wasted my money. Every time that I go in, I feel like they are putting their best foot forward, even if sometimes it's a little bit of a misstep. Like I said, leave your list below. Feel free to disagree with me, but don't hate me for the fact that I put WALL-E so low and Cars so high. I know that that's wrong, but like I said, this is my personal ranking, and I have my personal memories with each of these films. And yeah, that's all I've got to say. I hope that you guys are liking these videos. It's a new thing for me, so if they're not the best ever, feel free to leave some tips below on how I can make them better and how I can switch up the formula to make things move a little bit quicker for the people watching. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Feel free to share it with someone. Click the like button if you're interested, and that would be great. See you guys next time.